Oh, so this video we are going to talk about how to deal with the soft questions. So we need the diagram drawing and we need to learn how to do the elaboration. Okay, here are some steps that when we're doing the questions, we have to do these steps, okay? So in the diagram, we have to move the supply curve. We know that the supply change first. After supply change, and then we have to find the equilibrium determined by the demand supply interception. And then we can determine the price and the quantity, the total revenue, and the most difficult part is to find out their test burden, okay? So remember, to figure out that we are doing the things about the new quantity. That means the Q2 because it is after test, okay? After test, that means the new equilibrium. So in the new quantity, we try to find the vertical line between the supply curve, okay? So we have to show that in the next section. Okay, so vertical line in the between the supply, then that is the test burden of that unit. After that, we have to find out the consumer burden and the supply burden for the consumer, okay, because their burden is the change of the price. So between the old and new equilibrium, that means the equilibrium price, okay, P1 and P2, and that part belongs to the consumer, and the rest of that belongs to the supplier. Okay. Okay, so let's see if our data is input and a test, what will happen? Okay, so when we draw the supply demand, okay, and we just do what we used to, okay, P1 Q1, okay, so S1. So when there's a change, then when there's a test, the supply will decrease, then the supply curve will move upward, okay. So that's S2, and please locate that is parallel, okay, because that's unique for test and subsidy only, they are parallel. Then we try to figure out the equilibrium, okay, just what we used to. Okay, so the price increase, the quantity decrease, okay. So then we go to the next step. We have to find out the test burden, okay, test burden of the or the test amount, okay. So we need to go to the Q2 and to figure out the vertical distance between the new and old supply curve, okay. So is this vertical part, let me highlight it, this vertical part, okay. So actually this point is intersection between the quantity 2 and the old supply. Here is another boundary of the test, okay. So let's say it's P3, and we understand that this whole area, okay, that is the test amount that the government will receive, okay, the total test amount. But you can see that's divided into two pieces, okay, the upper part and the lower part, okay. But do not remember which one belongs to the consumer by upper or lower. Remember that the parts belong between the new and old equilibrium. New and old equilibrium, that is consumer burden, okay. And the part of the west, then this part, that is producer burden. And that's all. Okay, so let's use a real example to do the demonstration. So remember, every time when we read the questions, we have to do the analysis. Okay, so we have to check the background, change, and the consequence. Okay, so always use this to apply to all the demand supply questions. Okay, so for the background, we have to identify the market. So let's find the market from the corrections. Okay, that's not very specific market. It just say that it's about good eggs, okay, and there is no excess demand or supply, okay. So then next, what is the change? The change may be any increase or decrease of the tax and or the subsidy, okay. Here is that the government impose per unit tax, so that's the change, okay. So according to this, we understand that tax will affect supply and impose That means more tax is on that. The new tax is on that. So the seller will be unhappy. They do not want to do more. So the supply will decrease. After that, at last, we have to find out the consequence. Okay, it may be about the many things, tax amount or total revenue or tax burden. Okay, so just look at this, and we can find that it said that in the work condition, the producer bear greater burden than the buyers. Okay, that's what they say. Producer burden is bigger than the consumer burden. Okay, so that's what we have. The first, we understand that that is a supply decrease. Then second, the final result is producer bigger than consumer. And according to what we learned, we understand that why, what make it have a difference. The electricity of supply and demand. Okay, so if producer have a greater burden, then electricity just opposite. They have smaller. Okay, they have smaller electricity. So that's what we have. According to the question analysis, we have to draw a diagram that have a supply decrease and the electricity of a supply is smaller than the electricity of demand. Okay, so let's draw the diagram. So first, we have to draw a supply decrease, and second, about the electricity. So we have to think about how to show the electricity. Okay, so remember, we for the electricity of demand, we use the upper part, that is elastic, right? And the lower part of the demand curve will be inelastic. And for this electricity of supply, if elastic, then it will be flatter, elastic. That means in opposite. If it's just like a vertical curve, then it would be more inelastic. So I just try to draw. Okay, this time demand should be more elastic and supply should be less elastic. So on the upper part of the demand curve, we try to draw on the upper part and try to draw a vertical line as the supply. Okay, so and how about the change? Then that will be simple. Okay, supply will decrease. Then we have a original P1 Q1, then that is P2 Q2. Okay, so here we find a new equilibrium quantity. So we find the vertical distance between the S1 and S2. Then we have the third line, that is P3 here. Okay, so then I can identify the test burden. Okay, this is two parts of test burden. I just use in the real examination, you cannot use colors, right? So I use a different slope of the shadow area. Okay, so to represent the. Okay, so the green one, because it's between the equilibrium, so it's consumer burden. The yellow one, because that is the west, so that is the producer burden. Then we have to double check. We found that the producer, because in the question the producer have a greater burden, so the diagram show it, so we make it right. Okay, so if you find that it's opposite, so you just change the supply curve into a flatter version. Okay, draw again, and then you'll find the answer. Then that's the diagram. Very easy. Okay, so for the elaboration, we try to write the elaboration, how to get the margin. Okay, so here we set up impose per unit test on good X, right? Okay, will decrease supply. So supply change. Okay, then we try to we try to write down the change of the P and Q, just like used to it. We're used to it, right? So equilibrium, price increase, P1 to P2, equilibrium, quantity decrease. So we get, maybe we get marks from here, maybe not, depends on the question. Then we have to show that, about the test burden. Because it asks you in what condition, so you have to show that you understand the condition. When the price elasticity of, according to what we have, here, supply is greater than the price elasticity of demand. Then producer, just rephrase the correction, Producer test burden will be greater than consumer burden. So here you may show the burden, The consumer burden will be the green part, right? So that's a P1, P2, and Q2, to show this area. So when we write it, that's just consumer burden, P1, P2, Q2, using this part to show the area. And for the producer burden, the yellow part, P1, P3, and Q2, this one, So test burden is P2, P3, Q2, should be here. So we finish all.